Today, it is my delight to introduce you to Amy Brown, a dear friend and mentor to me, and the brilliant founder of SoDo Consulting, and a leader whose life is a living example of generosity, resilience, and soulful leadership. Amy shares the deeply personal story behind SoDo's founding, how a time of personal loss and uncertainty sparked an unexpected expansion through collaboration and trust. We explore the power of asking for help, mentoring in the moment, and leading from the heart. This conversation is rich with wisdom, humor, and the kind of honesty that leaves a mark. I'm your host, Katherine Jelinek, and this is the Expanders Podcast, presented by The Skinny Platform, the place for entrepreneurs with something to share and who want to be heard. Hello, everybody. It's Katherine Jelinek with The Skinny Platform. Today, I am so excited to get to bring you Amy Brown, founder of SoDo Consulting. She is a leadership development and management guru, and also a dear friend of mine and a mentor of mine, and I am a lucky lady to have her in my life. Welcome, Amy. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Katherine. Thanks for having me. Excited about it.
Yes, so am I. So today we're going to talk about a lot of different things. Some of the things we've teed up, Amy, include generosity and the role of generosity in leadership, mentorship, resilience, and something I'm going to lead us in with is one of the things I love most about you, which is all of these things and more. You have such a natural way of inviting in collaboration with other people. And in a way where people aren't assigned roles necessarily, but it almost feels like an invitation to offer our gift and to be our part and to add it and weave it into the whole. And how SoDo even really got going has a big story of resilience and collaboration within and underneath it. And I know you're open to sharing it. It's a big personal story, but if you don't mind just beginning with that.
Oh, okay. Well, let's dive right in then.
Right.
All right. So, as background, I got my start in leadership development and management development and talent management when I worked at Microsoft. And I was there about 13 and a half years. And I was very fortunate because I entered the company at a time where there was rapid growth. And so they took chances on people and allowed you to take roles that maybe you weren't fully qualified for. And in my case, not academically qualified for, but they saw potential. And because of that, I was able to rotate through a number of roles from recruiting management to management development to leadership development to executive speech writing to communications management. So it was quite a journey. And while I was
quick, when you're hard on yourself about the academic side, your academics were excellent, but you're just saying that you went to school for like fashion, right?
Yeah, okay. I wouldn't even say my academics were excellent, Katherine.
Right. Well, I don't know you to be anything but a brilliant woman, so I believe that you're probably underselling here. But I know that you had a fun, like, school background and something very different than what you do.
Very, very different. This is what I always tell the young upcoming generation is I'm living proof. It doesn't really matter what you get your degree in, just as long as you explore, you allow yourself to find new passions and follow that path. And that's what I did. And I feel like I landed in a professional calling, maybe by chance.
I love that. Goes back to Joseph Campbell, follow your bliss. And all across that board. Okay, so continue on. You got to have this kind of smorgasbord of opportunities through the different roles that you had.
Yeah, it was a smorgasbord. And I realized through that journey that I was becoming more and more passionate about management leadership development because having great managers and leaders made such a positive impact on your life. And having not great managers and leaders also had a strong impact on your life. And so I wanted to contribute to that in some way in helping people gain skills there because I experienced both. And as I was toying with what to do after Microsoft, I knew at some point that I was going to pursue my entrepreneurial spirit. Back when I was in my mid 20s, I started a hat design company as a side gig and
I didn't know
sold.
that.
Yeah, yeah. I sold women and children's designed hats to Nordstrom's and other retailers. And I did that
Wow.
for a while. And I had some personal circumstances that led me to let that go. But I had a taste of being an entrepreneur. And I thought, I'd like to really lean into this and do this at some future point in my life. So, I planned for about 3.5 years before I left Microsoft for what I was going to do next. And that was going to be starting my own thing and branching out there. And I decided in 2009 that I would make the leap. At that time, I had adopted my daughter from China and she was 2 years old, and I brought her home in March of
Wow.
2009. I was taking 6 months off to take care of her. And while I was on that leave, I knew in my heart that this was probably a good time to make the leap because I wanted more autonomy, more flexibility with my time. I didn't want the 2+ hour commute that I had each day. And I was in a pretty demanding job and just was the kind of the right conditions for me to say maybe it's time to make a change. And so I started SoDo in 2010 and took the pieces that I love the best and bolted them together and launched SoDo. And about 2 years in, one of my contacts from Microsoft was working at LinkedIn at the time, and she invited me to put forward a proposal to do some work around assessment instruments there. And I did. It was accepted. And I began traveling to California and back, and starting in spring of it would have been 2012. So started traveling back and forth, and it was a little bit tricky because in May of 2012 my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia,
Wow.
and so that was a tough time, and we had to move her out of independent home she'd been in for 40 years into something with more care. And but I got started and I love the work. So I was doing some local work here in the Puget Sound area, doing this work in California. And my daughter at that time was 5 and started kindergarten, and life was really sweet. And then in October of 2012, her dad, Jim, passed away suddenly of a deep vein thrombosis. A blood clot went from his calf to his heart, and he died instantly. And it was so unexpected. And, your first thought is, how am I going to tell my daughter? How am I going to care for my daughter? And, so I'm in this job now where I'm traveling, and that's not a good recipe for success. And of course I wasn't able to work for a period of time. And luckily part was I had a lot of work on the books at LinkedIn and other places. And so I called in some colleagues that I really respected and asked them if they could fill in and take this work on for me while I was getting emotionally back on my feet. And they did.
Mhm.
And they did the excellent job that I respected them for, and grew the business. And so for a few months, they were out there representing SoDo. They were bringing in more work. And so when I was ready to engage, I had more work than I could do.
Wow.
And so that's how SoDo as a team sport developed. It was out of this necessity. And I had people, including my parents, saying, you really should go back to Microsoft or go into a
Mm.
corporate job, go into something secure, something safe, something where you're not traveling at all. And I really wrestled with that because I loved what I was doing. And one of my mantras, as you know, is faith over fear. And I just had faith that I could make this work somehow. And I think also I was hoping that if, in case I was wrong, I would have a safety net to fall back on. I left Microsoft on good terms,
Mm-hmm.
so I felt like there were hands to catch me if I needed it.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, so fast forward to today, we have 45 people on the SoDo team. The community come in and work, whether it's they do executive coaching, if they do a values identifier assessment, if they work with the huge variety of programs we have like SL2 and Insights and DISC and Enneagram, and they bring their gifts, and then we're able to reach so many more people, which was really my goal in the first place, was to have this exponential impact. And as much as I loved fashion, I didn't think that the life impact of fashion was going to land in the same way. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a little bit about the beginnings of SoDo, but back to the community, how the community grew. It was really not planful, and it was dependent on my ability to ask for help, which I wasn't great at. And this was one of those big life lessons that when you ask for help,
Look what happens.
it will happen. Yeah.
I mean, you grew your business through asking for help and through people showing up for you from their hearts. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I did.
What I love too is in your story, there's in your story, even beyond, I know, the gym experience, there's so many moments of resilience. And when I hear you say your mantra of faith over fear, I feel like that's what you that's kind of your recipe to resilience somehow, is that continued trust in the face of life's uncertainties and in the face of life's tragedies, is that continuing to lean into trust. And yeah, and I love that this story too, through that trust, you invited in people to get to show up for you, which there's so many wonderful people around you. I mean, that's one of your gifts, is your network, but it's just so much love, so many friends, so much goodness around. And and then
Present
people are,
company included.
oh, you're too sweet. We just when we talk about collaboration in terms of SoDo, I love that it actually began with people showing up for you, because that's just back to the huge generosity theme in your life. You are constantly showing up for other people and offering things to them with an open heart. And I feel like something about collaboration isn't even the right word with
Mhm.
how what you do. I feel like there's still some more elevated word that we might not have yet, because it's we were talking in preparation for this. It's for
Yeah.
me, the way when I see you lead, it's like you're the symphony orchestra conductor, just
I've
able
always
to
loved
like
that analogy.
able to understand where people's best song fits in with the collective major song, and where the gift weaves in. And it's just such a delight to see you do that, because you help people shine is what you really
Mhm.
do, and plug them into places where their gift is going to be respected and revered and excited for. And so yeah, that's a huge leadership gift, and it's so cool that you get to offer it for such big companies in the US. It's incredible, and beyond the US. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think because the opportunities were offered to me, like throughout my entire career, I was constantly going into roles that I wasn't prepared for. And
Mhm.
people took chances on me and got to know me and got to know what they thought I was capable of doing. And that opened doors. And, I've had my share of roles that I've tried that were not for me. So it's not all ponies and unicorns and rainbows here about my
Yeah,
career
like
journey.
life
I've
doesn't happen. Yeah.
hit some walls, but it opened my eyes to what happens when you do get to deeply know people. And understand what they're passionate about, what they think they can bring, and then it's just get out of their way, help create opportunity, and allow them to flourish.
Okay, so let's take that into generosity and generosity's role in leadership. Because when you say something like what you just said, where you believe in getting out of the way and allowing
Mhm.
them to flourish and connecting people with opportunities. And when I hear that, that's at the heart of what I know you to be so great at. And it's like this generous leadership style. So what do you like? What's your definition of generosity?
Giving unconditionally, doing it because you feel it's the right thing to do, not because you're trying to get something in return. So it's not a transaction, it's really a gift. And there's times, you and I spoke in preparation for this just recently where I had done something done a fair amount for someone, and then I had the feelings of, well, I'm not getting something back here, and it was just a real slap in my face. I'm like, well, wait a minute, what's happening here that this situation is bringing up these feelings? What is it about the relationship with the person, or why this when not that? And it really caused me to do some introspection and unpack what was happening. And I think I got to the bottom of it. And uh, part of it, I would say, was just like some really buried insecurity.
Mm,
So I had to bring the light on it and face it. And it's not
yeah.
anything I talked about directly with the person. I went off and was processing and not with them, not to make it
Mm.
theirs. But that was a bit of a wake up for me. So I can say, oh yeah, it's about giving unconditionally, but yeah, there's times I can get caught myself.
Okay, well, that's a remarkable example. Thank you. Because, first of all, everybody, Amy, and I'm sure you're sensing her personality already. Like, it's like this generous beam of sunshine, like, for the whole experience here. And then also, you weaving this in is really key, because the thing is even when we have a natural disposition and a gift in something, it's not like we're not human,
Yeah.
and not like we don't have another edge and a boundary to
Yeah.
things. And so cool to hear this example, because first of all, you're digging in, you're putting the light of awareness on it, you're finding your own like inner story behind why you were looking for something. So that's really cool, deep and rich. But I think it also begs and brings up some other topic related to generosity: is what's the role of
Mhm.
boundaries? When are we
Mhm.
overgiving? Like, in general, love the concept of generosity and giving without anything expected in return.
Yeah.
But how do we kind of protect ourselves, or know the guardrails to have around that? Like, what do you say to that kind of thing?
When many, many years ago, when I was married, we went to marital counseling, and the we were talking about this role of helping and helping each other. And the counselor said, helping can be another form of control. People use helping to control.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh, ouch. I
Woo.
think I resemble that remark. And so, to your question about the boundaries, I think for me, when I sense that there's some of this I might be trying to help to control an outcome or control someone else's perception. I get my little spidey senses going, and I'm like, I think that might be going on. And I'm not going to get the saying right. What is it, Catherine? Where, you know, what you see in other people, what bothers you about other people is what you need to look
Oh,
at in
it's just a
yourself. I can't
mirror of what
remember.
you
How's
got.
that saying go?
I don't think I'm going to nail the saying either, but it's essentially the things that get us pissed off in other people is just a reflection of something we have in ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm like, so that's kind of one of my markers. I'm like, is this really annoying me? Damn it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need to look at this.
Okay. Hold on. Okay. Because you're taking that even in a further reflective place. I love the spidey sense that you're getting and that you're like the control. You're right.
Yeah.
That it is a way that, and I mean, like, when we're in households and you're a mom and you're running things, like, help to control and help to get an outcome. I mean, I know I do.
What else is the day
It
about,
is.
man?
Yeah, right. It's definitely a lever that's used. But I love that you're checking that and that you're raising that as a way to, like, understand where your generosity is coming from. That's such a key question. That's not at all where I was even getting, where, like, boundaries, I feel like sometimes there's that, are you giving to kind of like something that do you ever feel like you experience that? Maybe you don't, and maybe this is really important to get to. Is like when you're giving open-heartedly,
Mm-hmm.
like are you ever overextending yourself? Is there ever a need for boundaries, or is it more of this something on the inside you need to check in with, like the control and the helping to
It's a good
control things?
question. I'm sure. I'm sure there's some boundary. I'm sure there's definitely boundary work there. Um, yeah, I'm sure there's. Yeah, I when I think back to myself when I was in my 20s, and I've done decades of therapy here. So
Love it.
um,
Yes.
and I don't think I was great. Not what only was I not great about setting boundaries, I wasn't great about respecting other people's boundaries.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I and if you're listening to this and I did that to you, I apologize, because that is definitely an area that I've really tried to work on. But yeah, I didn't respect other people's boundaries at time, because I had this, oh well, this is the right thing to do, or and would put my needs in front of maybe the needs of the overall situation, and it didn't end well. And
Hmm.
therefore, uh, I think becoming much more attuned to boundaries, my own and other people's, has been a lifelong project.
Hmm. All right. You are the best. I love your 9 levels of awareness and, like, revelation here, because that's not the version of you that I know by far. I mean, I get that we all are a
Thank
certain
goodness.
version of ourselves in our 20s. And that's I
It
mean,
makes me so happy to hear you say that, Catherine. You don't even know.
yeah, no, for real. I mean, to the generosity strength that you have, I think one of the things I noticed that is an element of generosity, now that you're highlighting this, it is the respect and the knowing when to catching people's signals and knowing when to drop something, which I know I've seen you do that. You're kind of like, oh, we're in an uncomfortable place, rested, moving on, like I've seen you do that with grace. So,
Thank
but
you.
I mean, most things that we've learned come out of, like, having had mistakes in the other direction too. So I get that, but it's kind of like one of those things, because I just see you as nothing but the delighted, open-hearted sunshine beam. So it's revelatory and helpful to know about the different chapters and the different things you've learned and experienced from those chapters.
Yeah, yeah. It is one of those things where my truth is, I do wish I could go back to people that I didn't respect boundaries, or I just, like, I wasn't, and just really say, hey, I'm sorry, and I've learned, and it's taken me maybe longer than other people to get here. And one of them being my first husband.
Mm.
Like, I think oftentimes if I were to go back in time, I would show up very differently than I did. And I don't know that if that would mean that that would change the trajectory of that relationship, but I do know I
Mhm.
would show up very differently. And so I keep
Totally.
that. I try and keep that in my mind. And I have a colleague who talks about the big legacy that you leave. Excuse me one second.
Mm. Mhm.
They like the capital L legacy and the
Mhm.
small L legacy. Your capital L legacy is, when I pass on, how are people going to remember me and what's been my impact, my footprint. But the small
Yeah.
L legacy is that ripple you leave after every interaction. What you said, what
Mm.
you did, what you
Mm.
didn't say, what you didn't do. And to try to be cognizant on remembering that there's this lowercase L legacy, like every time you talk to somebody and you interact with them, whether it's at the grocery store or with a friend or a neighbor, and just striving to make that the type of legacy and ripple you want them to experience. And
Mm.
I'm just coming off of a weekend. It was my daughter's last roller derby tournament in Oregon.
Oh.
Last of her career. She's graduating out of the junior league. And emotions run high at roller derby. And I don't mean just the kids, I mean the parents. Some parents are very invested in what's happening. And I find, like, when that happens, when I see people just, their emotions are heightened, and there's things going on for them, I shift into, okay, well, what role can I play in making whatever's happening a better experience in the moment? And that doesn't mean like putting lipstick on a pig if it's a bad situation or something, but
Mhm.
can I be present in a way that helps calm them or diffuse them? Or can I offer to give space, or whatever? I kind of I think about that, because I know when people do that for me, it is so appreciated. And that's one thing I think you're very gifted at, Catherine. You're
Mm.
very gifted at sussing out what a situation needs or what a person needs, and adapting and flexing
Mhm.
accordingly. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy learning from you.
Oh my gosh, Amy. No, thank you. I'm just going to say thank you. I really appreciate that because I feel like I'm always absorbing so much from you. And I love you weaving in this example because this is to me how one can express moment to moment generosity. Like,
Mm.
this is when you're showing up to elevate each moment to the degree that you can.
Mm.
And I love that, even with thinking about, oh, there's some serious energy in this room or this roller
Yeah.
derby space. How can I you're not thinking these words in your head necessarily, but how can I give with this open heart? What can I do to make
Mm.
this experience better? And part of it is because you sense you're a sensitive person, there's a collective weaving always. Like,
Mm.
what's going on in the room, you can feel it, everybody can feel it, and it'll make it better for you and make it better for everybody in that space if that energy can get diffused a little bit. But it's so cool to me because this is an example of you being you
Mm.
and generosity being offered even through the minutia of a personal experience and just
Mm.
assessing energy.
Yeah, and when we talked about the being unconditional, this I can see when I talk about where I can get tripped up. Like, let's say I have intentionally been putting my focus to kind of diffuse, and then there's no reciprocity to it.
Mm.
And I know I'm my best self when I observe that, and I'm like, that's fine. That's who cares?
Hmm.
And um and I'm maybe not my best self if I'm like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, but who doesn't have that go through their mind? If you've just shown
Yeah.
up and listened quite a bit to someone, I mean, usually you're thinking, oh, the
Oh,
mic's
for
going to
sure.
turn over. I'm going to get a chance to say my piece.
For sure. All right. I know. I know.
Hmm.
I know.
But curious to raise that as a nuance of, can one be more generous and just show up to listen without potentially getting the chance to be heard? You know?
Mm, yeah. 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 I know. One of the things I most admire about other people is their ability to be curious, to be really interested in the other person, and I think that is such a form of generosity when it's I'm
Mm,
not, to your point, I'm not waiting to take my turn. I'm not asking you questions so that you're going to turn around and ask me questions and then I get the stage.
right.
And so to me, when I see that happening in any forum, whether it's personally or at work, I always instantly tag that as a generous moment that's happening. So I feel like there are so many people out there who really are the type of generous soul that we're talking about, and they don't even realize it.
They think they're just curious. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and they are curious, and
Yeah.
it's a real form of generosity.
This is good stuff. You know what it makes me think of? The Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, because he shares in that book, he's just like, you know, how you can be the most interesting person at the table? Don't say a word, just keep asking questions. And then they'll walk away thinking, wow, that person was so great. And yeah, is that a thing? But I think this is where you
He was
and
onto
Dale
something.
Carnegie. Yes, but then everybody listening, tune in right now because this is Amy Brown has an incredible network of people who are really wonderful and love her deeply and will, like you heard some of these stories, like drop a pin, do something significant to show up for her. She's got a great network. Dale Carnegie, When Friends and Influence People, the tie between is this soul of generosity. That's so key. Like, look at that. And it's not like you're doing what you're doing to have a great network so
Mhm.
that things can occur and so that, you know, you can build a
That's
rock
right.
star business with clients like LinkedIn and Microsoft. And you really
Yeah.
work with the coolest. And so, but look, I mean, that's what we all know, right? We hear that, you know, when you give, you really receive.
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
such a cool, like such an easy to see through the, you know, when one can see your life and has the delight of getting to be in your orbit. It's
Can we
so
have this talk every week, Catherine? Can
yeah,
we
let's
just
do
like
it.
get on the call and just
You know,
break the
maybe
mood
you just need
brightener, I
to
have
start
to say.
you can just start your own podcast called Generous Leadership, and I can just come on and
Okay, all
say
right.
hi and join you once in a while. But
That's amazing.
okay, I know we're rocking on our time here, but let's talk about the role of mentorship. Something
Okay.
that, again, you show up with your generosity and is you are a mentor to me, you're a mentor to many. You don't hesitate to give people career insights and offer your ideas and support. You know, mentorship. What? Talk to me about it. Like your philosophy on it, your how big of a deal it is, what you think about it.
Mm. Well, I'm a big fan of mentorship. When I talk to people who are early in their career, my sense is that they think mentorship is this very formal, oh, well, now we're going to talk every month or we're going to talk every quarter, and I'm going to come as the mentee with an agenda. And maybe that's true. Maybe you have a formal mentor relationship, but I think the magic is in the mentoring that is in the moment and is spontaneous and as simple as somebody says, "Hey, how'd you handle this thing?" And you're like, "Well, I handled this thing that way and I learned that from it." And then you're mentoring. Suddenly you're mentoring. And I have a fantastic mentor myself, Sheila Connor, who is very instrumental for me and helped me on the career journey to transition from in-house corporate to being an entrepreneur. And she career coached me. And I don't know that I would have done. I she asked such good questions. Talk about a generous soul. She is the embodiment of generosity.
Mm.
Uh, but she just asked such good questions that made me realize the potential and the possibility, because I think sometimes we allow our self-limiting beliefs to get in the way on things. And when you have a good mentor, even if it's just a good friend, who asks you that question that allows you to examine those self-limiting beliefs and turn them over,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's such a gift to,
Mm.
I think it's such a gift. Yeah. And I
Um,
think people, that, sorry,
no, you're good.
keep
Keep
going.
going.
The kitchen cabinet type approach, where you have a tribe or a village or a community that you lean on. You're not, oh, well, this one person has to be everything to me, that
Mm-hmm.
I can go to this person for this type of help and this person for that type of help. And I think that's important too, because then that allows you to have access to wisdom you wouldn't otherwise have. And you're also not pressuring that relationship to be everything from a mentoring
Mm.
perspective.
Yes. Okay. So many things. Number one, I feel like when you mentioned Sheila, right? Is that her first name, Sheila?
Mm-hmm.
Take
Mm-hmm.
it. Um, so she's she's an up leveled mentor, because what she is in my definition is she's an expander, which is part of the title of this podcast. But she's someone who took a corner and kind of blew your
Mm-hmm.
boundaries out. It opened, and like you're like, whoa, look at this, can look like this instead, and
Yes.
pressed your limits and expanded them a little further. So I highly recommend everyone to always have expanders in your life, especially for the different categories you're looking to grow. Mentor, yes. And she was able to share experiences, and I think that's something important to highlight, is whenever you're needing mentorship, even if it's like in the moment, to just ask someone for their experiences. It doesn't have to be asking for their advice, but asking about when you did this in the past, what did you do, or about a time in your experiences. Um, because that's when you access what you mentioned, which is wisdom. People's wisdom comes from reflecting on their past experiences, and it may not be do what I did, but they might reflect on what they learned, which is the wisdom, and how that
Yes.
informs how they move forward today. And then the last thing you said there is the most important, is the fact that having an ecosystem is key.
Mm-hmm.
Never over expecting any one relationship to deliver all of it. Like, how can any of us have that? And that's back to one of the superpower of bringing in the collaborative collective, the ecosystem of people doing their gift and shining their shine. And the is just, of course you would weave that in, the fact that
Mm-hmm.
you can't just have one, that having that symphony is in somebody for each area is so big and beautiful. And let's layer it right back into SoDo today, because I think that what you have is so remarkable. From someone like me, I look and see, and I feel like you've got so many people who are playing the game they love to play the most,
Mm-hmm.
and you're there excited to get to plug them in and help them meet opportunities where what they're doing is needed. And the fact that your roster is now 45 people, a part of that family, that team. How cool.
Yeah. Well, this, Catherine. It can be lonely if you are a person who's out there working on your own. Even if you have fantastic clients, you don't experience team in the same way that you do when you work inside a company. And for the community that I work with, myself included, there's that craving for team, like that you have people not just to rely on, but to bounce things off of, to have fun with. And so the community at SoDo, one of the lessons I learned while at Microsoft was the importance of values, of being clear on your personal values and in SoDo what the company values are, and ensuring that the people who are coming in who would ultimately be representing SoDo align to those values. And that's one of the, I think, of course, I'm incredibly biased, but I think that's one of the things that makes SoDo so special is the values driven qualities that the people on the team have. Everyone who works with us, also they have their own clients, they work with other partners, and so they're all expanders. They're out there doing their thing. They may be partnering with other firms similar to SoDo. They're working with us, and it just it creates this community with so much depth of experience that we ultimately all benefit from. Twice a year we have virtual calls, we have extended team calls, and we might get anywhere from 15 to 25 people on a call, and everyone is, it seems, so excited to talk to each other. We spend like an hour just, hey, here's what I'm working on now, and here's where I might need some help, and it's
Mm.
just so energizing. And so, what I would say to kind of bring this back to not just SoDo, but I'm going to jump back to the mentoring for a minute. Yeah, I think that's what makes our team extra special, because we all can mentor each other very informally usually, but we're all that much better because of the quality of people that we have surrounded ourselves with. And it's enabled SoDo as a business to offer so many more programs and depth experiences that if it were just Amy Brown as it was in the beginning, that's limited. There's a limited amount of things that I can offer, and this way we're able to bring so much. And that's been my goal this year, and the last half of last year was to be more of a talent agent for the team, and to do a good job of representing what everyone can bring. And so on LinkedIn, we're doing highlights of team members and trying to really invest more there to just get the word out about how talented this group of people is. See, but I'm
Mm.
very biased. I know I'm very biased,
Oh,
but
yes. But what a fun insight into your team calls. And
they're fun.
what I heard though, is how important it is that to be able to share where one might need help,
Yep.
and the role that that has in opening the field for generosity and mentorship. Is you can't create that kind of flow of a dynamic and
Yeah.
an exchange that builds everyone up if you're not honest about where you might need, the influence of other people.
Well, it goes back to vulnerability, right?
Mhm.
It's the best leaders are people, in my experience, who are able to be vulnerable, able to be authentic, able to ask for help, able to hear ideas that aren't their own. And those are all qualities that we really try to foster. And in my early career and personal life, I wasn't great at being vulnerable. And my argument is, a little bit, it was a different time. I feel we've come a long way.
Truly, thanks Brene Brown, right?
We've come
And
a
all the
long
other.
way, but it was hard. It was really hard for me. Admit I was wrong, or admit I didn't know something. Again, it's one of those great life lessons. I realized the more that you can do that, the more access you have to smart people who are there, ready to ready to lend a hand. It was, I think, one of my biggest career learnings was the value of vulnerability.
Mm. Well, I feel like you've been doing that even on this episode, like trying to highlight you for your generosity, and your next story is the one area where you weren't like as like open-hearted. But it's so important, I think, for everyone to get a chance to see inside another person and how we work. Like that's the only way we really get to learn. So that is generosity.
I'm sorry. Can I pause? My doorbell just rang. So
Yep.
can we mark this? And hold on one second.
Mark, pause. We'll roll right in. So, Amy, we were just talking about how in this episode, I mean, like you've showed up with vulnerability, like showing how you've, I mentioned that you're a generous and open-hearted person, and your first example is an opposite example of that. And you're like, you feel like you still have some area to work. So obviously you become very vulnerable and learned how to, but that's like back to generosity. I think sometimes sharing our edges and the areas where we're very human can be one of the most generous things we can do, because it helps other people realize like, oh, you're not alone. Look at this is how the work really is done in human form. Like it's
such a good phrase. The work is done in human
leadership
form.
Isn't also polished, even though, golly, you sure make it look that way. But it's the gritty inner work of someone, becoming more aware of their own responses and doing what they can to continue to stay open-hearted. So anyways, what would you say to, just as we conclude, last words of wisdom on leading with generosity?
Leading with generosity. Something that helps me, this is true in a variety of formats, but I always like to think of role models. Like who would I consider a role model for, in this case, generosity? And what would they do? So sometimes I think we get in our own way, because if we don't really, if it's not a default mode for us, and we haven't practiced the muscle a lot, I find that can be a really great way to say, oh, well, who does this thing well? And I'm just going to channel that person. And what would Catherine do here? I'm going to do what Catherine would do, even if it's not what Amy would do, because that gets me closer to that ideal. So I would say, on the spirit of generosity, that if you think about the most generous people in your life, what is it that they do? And I'm going to say, I know comparison is the thief of joy, but what I would say is, are you reaching your potential there? Are you reaching that potential that you're leaving the kind of small L, large L legacy that you want to have? And, and if there's room for improvement, and I'd say, being human, there's probably always room for improvement. Pick something small that brings joy to your heart to do. And, it's just not going to make everyone else's life better. It makes your life better.
I love this, but it will make others' lives better too, because if it is improving your small L or your big L legacy, that's the ripple effect and the impact on others.
Yeah.
Amy, thank you for giving me so much to chew on over here. I really appreciate all of your reflections, and just like everybody else listening, I will be deeply reflecting on especially my small L legacy ripple effects in each moment.
I think you're an excellent role model, Catherine, for the small L's and the large L's.
Well, Amy, I've got all my vulnerable moments too. And if we were going to take another 5 minutes, I could spill more beans on how things really can look ugly over here on that. Like we all have those examples. I go pick up my kids, things can get spicy quick. But yeah, it's just like leaning into each moment and really being conscious of what we're leaving behind. Thank you so much, Amy, for such a thoughtful episode. This was lovely. And everyone, thank you for listening, and stay tuned next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Expanders Podcast, presented by The Skinny Platform. You can catch more episodes and be notified of newly released episodes by following us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or subscribing on YouTube. For more information on the Expanders Podcast and The Skinny Platform, visit our website, www.theskinnyplatform.com.